Hello, lovely beings. I'm JJ Rose. I am going to talk about some best practices for not only the mundane, but also for your spiritual practice. I'm going to start off with a little bit of just kind of general, something that everyone can walk away taking something from. And then I'm going to work up to things that might not pertain to you now, ever. But for those of you who are there, hopefully you can glean a little bit of knowledge. All of these are coming from me, from things that I've experienced, things that I've tried, things that have went well, things that didn't go well, hence the reason why I call them best practices, because I actually do have the experience and the authority to speak on these. Now, one of the first ones that I want to talk about is just having a very diverse group of friends and people in your life that you can bounce things off of. If you're surrounded by everyone who thinks and practices the same as you, it's very difficult to glean new knowledge and or interpret or understand signs that might be given to you along the way. So a pretty fresh and fun thing that happened to me lately, I had this really intense dream. And there were 3 parts to this dream, all of them very, very different and diverse. But there was this constant throughout the dream that kept popping up in all 3 parts. And so I'm walking with a friend, and she's not normally in this stuff, but I can talk to her about it. She'll listen. And she's fairly interested, but it's not necessarily her thing. And so when I get done with the dream, I'm really excited about this magnificent thing that ends up happening in it. And at the end, she asked the question, well, what about that thing that pops up in all 3 parts of the dream? Like, have you thought about what the significance of that is? And I thought, I kind of did, but I blew it off because it's weird and it made no sense. And then she brought up the color of these objects and that the color of the objects pertain to a metal. And so when I looked up that metal and the spiritual significance of it and the physical properties as well, it ended up pretty much solving everything. So that's a really great example of why you want to have diverse people in your life to talk things through. I had another situation recently as well. I was talking to a friend of mine, just kind of messaging back and forth, and this really weird thing happened that normally I just kind of write off as like a me thing, but for whatever reason I told her about it, and all of a sudden she lets me know this entire thing in her culture that I never knew about, and therefore it made me really aware of something that on my own I probably wouldn't have been aware existed. And then, of course, the next day, everything that she said manifested, and it made a whole lot more sense. And it was just one extra way that Spirit was talking to me, that if I had not told her that experience, which, like I said, I normally wouldn't have, because I just wouldn't have. But Spirit guided me to, and she's the one who gleaned the answer from. So, extremely important. In your daily life, it's also good to have diverse friend group. Again, you don't want to just be surrounded by people who think and act like you do. It's nice, don't get me wrong. Things are kind of copacetic and even keel, but it is nice every once in a while to have someone, new, funky, or a little bit different, because you can learn so much from them. You can glean so much from, whether it's their culture, what they're interested in, even if it's their music taste. You would not believe the amount of new music I have discovered by people who are into something that normally I wouldn't even listen to, and all of a sudden now I got a new jam. So I think that one is apparent. Now, one that I'm really big on, but I don't know if I've spoken openly about this, and if I haven't, there's probably a reason why, is never give away all of the ways that you protect yourself. And I mean this physically as well as spiritually. So physically, great. You live with someone, you have a best friend, whatever it is. They know you have certain security measures in place within your home, on your body, whatever it is. You never want anyone to know everything. Period. Stop. When it comes to your spiritual protection, same thing. There's always got to be one part of your spiritual protection that you might not be vocal about or that you don't show. I know some people will use like amulets or, different jewelry, and they'll hide them. I.e., you're not able to walk by and see that the person is wearing that, or they'll have it in their pocket. Or I've just discovered there's now pocket socks. So, that's cool. Yes, as you could tell, I was watching the Weather Channel and I learned about pocket socks. See, the more you know. I literally had to just pause because I cracked myself up. Anyway, I hope you enjoy that. Pocket socks, they're a thing. So, in your spiritual practice, it's really, really important for you to have some sort of spiritual protection that not anybody but you knows about. Whether that is a physical item, whether it is a spiritual thing that you do, is extremely important. As much as I would love to say love and trust everyone and everyone has good intentions, I do live on this earth and I am a realist and I have seen some things. And unfortunately, as I've said before, not everyone is your friend. And there are times that people, whether they know they are or not, will try to go after you. And it could be something as small as you're in a tiff with somebody. It could be something bigger where someone just is jealous or has it in for you and they are sending bad juju your way. So always have a little something private that is just for you. Now moving on to the next. If something happens more than one time, pay attention. Okay? So normally with me, I have a rule that something has to happen like 2 or 3 times in order for me to really pay attention, take a look at it. There are things that are going to be one-offs. They're going to happen. They're going to grab your attention. You're going to know that it's weird. You've done all the physical stuff to rule out that there's, no physical cause to it. And that's a very distinct message just for you. And that caveats into something else, which is not all downloads or messages make sense right away, but it really is important for you to document and keep your ears and your eyes open. So in regards to downloads and messages, I have a lot of people who will ask me, I get the sense that this is going to happen. Why would Spirit tell me this or forewarn me of this if there's nothing I can do to stop it? Usually on things that aren't so pleasant. Well, sometimes it's giving you a heads up because energetically you're going to be working on it in some way, shape, or form, or someone is going to be there or be affected by it. Or you're going to have to change your day because, your route home is going to be dramatically changed, etc. Sometimes it's just to let you know that you have the ability to know things. And it's very, very random and it makes absolutely no sense. So I have this news app on my phone. And you know how all apps are, right? They kind of ask you in advance, what kind of news are you interested in? You tell them and then things pop up. Well, what I started noticing is that and YouTube all of a sudden started like bombarding me with all of these news stories. The first one was Pennsylvania and now it's Australia and it's August 22nd, 2023. So with Pennsylvania, this started a couple months ago and the first news story made sense because there was that awful truck and it was like a 18-wheeler semi that had flipped over on the freeway and caught fire and ended up destroying the main thoroughfare, I guess, through Philadelphia. And so, of course, that's national news. I totally understand why that would pop up. But all this other news started popping up about Pennsylvania. I mean, to the point where I was almost like, did I click on the wrong link? Or like, does it think I'm in Pennsylvania? I mean, nothing against Pennsylvania. I know a few people who live there, but I'm not, I don't live there. I'm not there a lot, we'll put it that way. So it, at first, it was kind of weird. And so I kind of checked in with the few people that I know that live there. Everything was pretty copacetic, nothing big, just kept the channels open just in case. Again, kept seeing all these really, I mean, they were really random news stories too. Like, first of all, I don't know what's going on in Pennsylvania, but more than two houses exploded. There were a train derailment, I think, and then there were a couple other things that ended up happening that, were awful, and I'm praying for the area. But it got my wheels turning because when I really went into the algorithm of the news, there was no reason whatsoever why Pennsylvania should have been coming up so much for me. And so I started thinking about the fact that we're in a Pluto return in the United States right now. And for those of you who don't know astrology, there's a wonderful astrologer named Joni Petrie on YouTube. I highly recommend her. She does Vedic astrology, not Western. So some of the terms are going to be a little different. But she had been talking about this about 6 months ago. And it makes sense, right? So Pluto is one of those planets that when it comes back for its return, it's basically digging all the stuff up that hasn't been dealt with. And it's very like subversive, and it's a lot of old stanky stuff, right? That people need to deal with. And when she had first talked about the Pluto return, because Pluto is a faraway planet and therefore a generational planet. So when it comes back to return, it takes a while. It's not quick. And the whole reason I'm sharing all of this is because during a Pluto return, it makes sense, all the stuff that we've been dealing with the last 3 or 4 years. It makes sense that all of a sudden racism is being drug back up and we're having to look at it and face it and all of the ugliness that goes with that. It makes sense that, the United States has almost been on the brink of a civil war for some years now. It makes sense that all of this nastiness has been drug up so that we're faced to look at it and deal with it. So yes, as awful as some of the stuff in the world is, there is a reason why it's all being drug up right now. And we're being forced to look at it, not only for the nation ourselves, but also because it impacts the world at large. And there are other countries that look at us and probably shake their head like, how are you guys still dealing with this in this day and age? And there are other countries that are probably looking at it saying, oh, yeah, we need to look at that too. So there's a reason for everything, and there's always a bigger reason. But I digress. Pennsylvania. So I'm kind of sitting there and I'm wondering one day, like again, because I'm being bombarded with all these news stories from Pennsylvania and Philadelphia in specific. And it made me remember that the Constitution was signed there. So as soon as I make that correlation in my mind, yes, it took me a while. Sorry about that. But it made sense. And I was like, oh, I'm getting all this news to kind of let me know. And as a reminder, all of this stuff that's going on, not with only within our country, but in that state in particular, there's a correlation. And yes, some people can say I'm grasping at straws, but I think you all understand. Now, as of late, I would say about the past week, my news stories now have backed off Philadelphia and Pennsylvania and are now giving me news stories about Australia. I have absolutely no clue why. I am getting literally local news stories. Like we're talking about a dog got loose on a road type of stories. Very, very odd, not from one particular region. So I'm not sure what to make of that, but I'm sure in time that will make itself apparent. So by me sharing these weird little stories, story time with JJ, it is in order to help you all understand that sometimes you're going to get these really random messages. Sometimes they're going to be on repeat and they're going to keep clapping, clapping, clapping till you get it, like me in Pennsylvania. And sometimes they're just going to keep on keeping on until whatever is to come or to be makes itself apparent. So not everything always makes sense at the time. And even if you were to share it with a diverse group of friends, they even might not have a clue. And if you keep getting no one knows, just put it in your back pocket, keep your eyes and ears open, don't look for correlations that aren't there, but at the same time, do document it, put a date on it, and, if you have a journal or a binder or something like that that you can go back to, in time, it might make sense. And sometimes it's absolutely nothing. It's just some weird algorithm that, you clicked on something odd. Now, I want to go back to, if something happens more than one time, pay attention. I've got a couple weird stories for you on this. So, one night I'm doing a meditation, and it wasn't night actually, it was like afternoon. And I'm doing a meditation, and in the meditation, part of it, you have your eyes open and then close while you're doing breath work, right? To just kind of reset the body. So on my last breath, in which I have my eyes open, I see this big spider on the ceiling. Kind of like a daddy long legs, but like a little bigger. And I had no fear. And I closed my eyes, and then, my brain started working a minute or two later and was like, hey girl. So I opened my eyes again, and there was no spider. So I was like, okay, maybe I saw that in the meditation, let it go, whatever. Or maybe the spider was that fast. I don't know how fast spiders are, but I know my eyes weren't closed for that long. So kind of put this out of my mind. Little later that night, I go to get in the shower. Boom. There's Daddy Longlegs. Okay. Could have been the one that I saw earlier in the room. Kind of just asked it to go on the other side, leave me alone, and gave it some space to do so, and then proceeded. Next day, I get a message from a friend who, no reason whatsoever why she shared this story. It was extremely random, but she had a spider fall on her that morning. And I guess that morning she had also had a dream about a spider. And then when she was getting in her car, a spider actually fell on her hair, which, first of all, terrifying. I'm not a huge fan of spiders. I mean, I appreciate them for what they do, but I'm working on my fear of them. So kind of thought that was weird. Okay, so within 24 hours, I've seen them twice, and now I have a friend randomly bringing this up to me. Okay, all right, no big deal, right? No big deal. Gonna let it go. So I go on my walk, and as I'm on my walk, I'm listening to a podcast, and randomly in the podcast, someone brings up a spider. And I'm walking and I'm kind of laughing to myself at this point. I'm like, all right, this is wake up, pay attention. And I turn a corner and I issue not. There is a van, and on this van is a giant spider with the company name Spider, just spelled weird. And at this point, I'm now cracking up in public, by myself, because everyone needs to see that. And I take a picture of it. I send it to my friend, and I said, okay, this is 5 now. And I get home and immediately, looking at spider medicine, what does the spider mean? And, get the definitions. Doesn't really pertain to what I think I'm going through, but, okay, bigger picture maybe. So anyway, that was like 2 or 3 months ago. And the reason I'm bringing it up right now is because twice today, absolutely randomly, I have encountered a spider. Twice. And it brought it up to my attention because, again, it happened more than once. I do keep a very clean house, so the fact that there are random spiders is kind of odd, especially one on my kitchen counter, and the other one where it was located was very strange. And, again, pay attention. So, for instance, if you have deer that are constantly running through your yard, seeing a deer isn't going to trigger you to go look up deer medicine because that's common. That's normal. But if you were to see an antelope, and antelope are not native to your area, that would definitely be something that you want to look up. Like the morning, I had a one-off where I'm in front of my house and a coyote walks by. And at first I just thought, oh, it's a random dog off its leash, until it crossed the street, came in front of my house, smiled, stopped, and stared at me, and then just trotted off like nothing. I do not live in a coyote area, so that was extremely weird. Took my, morning brain a little bit in order to figure out that was a coyote. Even Googled it to make absolutely sure. And then immediately went to coyote medicine. What does that mean? What does that signify? What's the spiritual significance? What is spirit trying to tell me? Obviously, that was a one-off because, thank God there weren't numerous coyotes in my area, because that's just not good. But the spider thing, again, spiders happen, right? Like, there's certain seasons, they just kind of come around. But seeing them that many in succession, not only in meditation, having someone come to them in a dream, then physically manifest, then me hearing about it on a podcast, and then seeing it on this van, that, it's screaming at me, right? So pay attention. So little fun story. My lovely friend Kat from Paranormal Heart podcast had this actually happen today. So apparently yesterday or the day before, she was driving on this road, very common road she uses all the time, and she saw a bicyclist, and immediately thereafter the car just stalled and died. And she had to have her husband come out, and he checks the car, and he tries to turn it on, and boom, the car turns on. It's fine. Okay, kind of weird, right? One off. Gonna ignore it. Maybe I've got a car issue, maybe I don't, but the car works now, so we're just gonna go. So today, she's driving. All of a sudden, I pop into her mind, and she sees me glowing with light, which is kind of funny because I was recording at that time, something else. And she sees a bicyclist, realizes she's in the same spot she was the day before, and boom, the car just stalls. Twice. Same spot, sees a bicyclist, and the reason we know it's the same spot is it happened in this very opportune part of the road, right? So there's no way you could get this mixed up with, oh, maybe I was a mile up or a mile back or whatever. Same spot, almost on repeat, sees the bicycle, car stalls. So I have told that she needs to stop over, because if this happens again, 3 times the charm, but she definitely needs to pull over in that spot and go take some pictures, not only of the sky, but just the surrounding areas, because something's trying to get her attention, and that's very obvious. Moving right along. I know I've talked about this before in regards to manifestation, but when you are trying to manifest something, please take the time to try it on for size, okay? And the reason I harp on that so much is because I have seen this go very sideways, not only with myself, but with other people. So saddle up, we're doing story time again. Okay, so a dear friend of mine was writing out her manifestation wish list for what she wanted in a partner. And her and I have talked about this for a while, and I've told her over and over that she says she wants a man who is a certain way, and I have told her, in knowing her as well as I do not feel that her and a man with that specific characteristic personality trait would be a good match, just knowing her personality. But of course, to each their own. Everyone, wants to do their own thing. And so she writes down on her manifest list that she wants a man to be, you know, very forward, almost aggressive in trying to capture her and her attention. So, unbeknownst to me, she writes this down to manifest it, and she goes on a trip. And a very lovely gentleman comes up while they're out to dinner, and things are going quite well. Okay, quite well. And, he's checking all the boxes. And he gets a little handsy. And, she tells him no, because A, we're in public, and B, no, I just met you. And then he gets very aggressive to a point that I am extremely uncomfortable with. That's probably why I did such a hard pause there, because I'm trying to control myself. I love my friends dearly, and I'm very, very, very protective. So basically, she got to the point where she almost had to break his hand, because he would not listen to the word no. Thankfully, when she told me this story, we were on top of a mountain with no cell phone or civilization, so I could go in a corner and scream and no one would hear me. So after I got done with my initial reaction of just being protective, I started laughing and I said, "You manifested that, didn't you?" And she admitted that she had put that on her manifestation list. And I said, "You're really, really lucky. Because when you go to manifest things, okay, if the universe, and trust me, the universe, God, source, whatever you want to call it, creator, knows what's best for you. And there are often times that we get in our minds, we get in our heads, and we think we know what's best and we want this, even though everything has been showing us that is not what's best for you. And so when you try and put your energy and your back into manifestation work, and it's not right, the universe is going to give you usually a little, I call it like a sampler plate, right? It's going to serve you up a little sample of this to see, do you really want this? And in her case, that was her sample, right? Do you really want to manifest a man with that particular characteristic? And the answer was hard no. So she learned the lesson and we've moved on. But I've seen this happen to many other people. I've seen it happen in manifesting work, and I've also seen it happen in clearing work. And this is why I'm doubling down so much on this particular audio. Because, let me give you an example, okay? A group of us were doing a full moon release, right? So write down all the things that you want to release, and then you go ahead and burn it, and then you make sure, because you are making space, whenever you clear something or you're trying to release something, you've now made space. So you need to fill up that empty space with good stuff, or at least a good intention, so that whatever is going to come to fill up that space will be what you want and not more clutter. So this one person in particular wanted to clear this issue. And, by all means, absolutely, right? Go ahead, do your releasing and your healing work. But the universe knew that this person wasn't quite over this particular issue, and they had not really taken into account why they had this particular issue to begin with, because part of it was a coping and a safety mechanism. So they go to clear this and they do the clearing and try and fill up with good intentions. And literally the next day, bam, they are smacked in the face by the universe with a situation that they really needed that specific thing they were trying to release to get them out of. And as they have to basically deal with this situation and ask back that trait that they were trying to release, they got the point that, okay, before I truly want to release something, I need to understand why it was there to begin with. And this is definitely part of your healing journey, of your shadow work. If if you're new to shadow work, there's a lot of great journals out there. There's a lot of great people who will talk about it, but it definitely is something internally you have to do. You have to come face to face with the good, bad, and the ugly within yourself. And you have to understand why it was there to begin with. Okay? Don't just try and release it because you don't want it anymore. You have to actually come face to face with the fact that you created this trait, or you came in with this trait for whatever reason. And understanding that will allow you to understand if A, you really should be releasing or clearing it, or if you can make it malleable and you can harness and change it for the better, i.e., maybe make it less of a toxic trait and more of a helpful trait. And this can be done for everyone in all walks of life, no matter who you are and where you are on your journey. So the really, really important message is make sure before you try to clear, release, or manifest that you really understand what it is that you're trying to release, why you had it, and or if you're manifesting, what it is that you want, and on the adverse, understand what you're going to have to give up in order to have that thing that you're trying to manifest. Whether that thing is happiness, if you want to manifest happiness, go right ahead. But you do need to understand within yourself, if you're addicted to misery and depression, which some people are, and it doesn't even have to be spiritual, it's just that's what you're into. I mean, there are emo people, right? And if that's your thing, if you want to manifest happiness, you have to be able to understand that you're going to have to let go of this other side. So, a really great example, there are some fantastic singers out there. I don't even have to mention them by name. And one in particular, I can remember her shtick, right? Like her whole singing career is all about these songs that, like, on contact will just make you cry, right? Like you instantly feel the pain, whatever it is that she was going through, that she's singing about. I mean, in-depth, raw feeling, like that was her thing. And like all people who wants to stay, sad and depressed forever, so she works really, really hard on manifesting happiness. And she ends up getting everything that she wanted, right? Like the career, she gets the romantic relationship and the family and all the good stuff. And she's really, really happy. And then, of course, her, label asks her, okay, we need you to write another album. And the only thing she can write about is happy stuff at this point because she's happy. She's not even able to go into those old emotions because she's not living there anymore. And so she writes this very happy album. And it comes out and everyone is anxiously awaiting it because she's huge, right? And everyone's like, okay, give us something to cry about. And the album comes out and it is a huge flop. I mean, huge flop. And I mean, it was close to almost rioting in the streets. Some people were. Because it wasn't on the trajectory of what she was so known for. And she ended up doing some interviews where people were like, hey, people are really panning your album. And she was like, I feel horrible. Like, I understand this is what they want from me, but I'm not in that space to produce that because I'm happy now. And I really wish people would just be happy with me as well, but that's not what they wanted from her. And wouldn't you know it, everything in her life shortly thereafter that she had built up for this happiness started to crumble. And then she went right back to writing albums about, all the misery and pain. And sold like hotcakes. So that would be an example of be careful what you wish for and be careful what you're trying to release. Really try that on before you manifest it, because there are things that people are not willing to give up. I knew someone who wanted to be in a relationship so bad. That's all they wanted. And I kept telling them, enjoy your free time. Enjoy being able to come home and do whatever it is that you want. Because when you get with somebody, it's not going to be like that. And what ends up happening? They get in a relationship. All of a sudden, they're super busy all the time. They have no time for themselves. They're not able to do any me time anymore. And then they're back to being miserable. And then the circle repeats. So trying things on for size, making sure that you're okay with whatever needs to change in order to have, something released or manifested is extremely, extremely important. I know I have beaten this one like a dead horse. I hate that phrase, but it's the only one that works here. But that, if I could shout this from the rooftops, this is one of the biggest things I have for people in your spiritual practice or in your healing journey, and just to get this out to the world. So please tell everyone you know. Now, in that little rant, I had mentioned that when you clear or released something, you've made space. And I want to thank my amazing cousin who was a yoga teacher. And so he would bring this up a lot when we were doing yoga classes. He would say, okay, you've made all this beautiful space. Now let's fill it up with, good intentions and good affirmations. And it stuck with me. We were doing a release one night, and there was one person who just wasn't getting the point and does this big old release and does not fill themselves back up with light and the intention for the antithesis of what they released to happen. And so the next day I check in with that person. I'm like, hey, how are you doing? And they were like, I feel like someone siphoned 80 pounds off of me, and I feel like there's a hole. And a little stunned, right? Because the night before we had done this huge release, everyone else is feeling super good afterwards, except for this person. And it was at that moment that the person realized how much they were holding on to all that baggage that they released as a coping mechanism. It was almost their safety blanket, if you will. And because when they did the release, they did not fill up all that space that they had just made with a proper good intention and with light in order for the universe to manifest, more good in there, they felt empty. And I never want anyone to feel empty after a release. I want you to feel good, right? Like just magnificent. And I'm sure there's things coming to some of your minds right now, and you know what I mean. I want you to feel like that. Speaking of things that your body is trying to tell you, moving on to the next thing, listen to what your body is telling you. If you're tired, you're tired, okay? Sometimes you're mentally tired, sometimes you're physically tired, sometimes you're spiritually tired, and it happens, trust. I had a really bombastic day last week, and I had scheduled, 2 clearings kind of back to back, and I knew that I had the energy for them. What I got sideswiped with were the emergency call and very random other call for help that happened before and after both of them. And I'm telling you, I probably slept a day and a half afterwards. I was spiritually exhausted. I needed complete silence. I needed to recharge. I wasn't able to listen to anything. Wasn't able to watch anything. I needed just complete silence and stare at a wall and do absolutely nothing. Sleep when I could, but it was a lot of just staring into the void, if you will. That is spiritually tired. But physical and mental tiredness also have to be addressed. Now, obviously, working out is good for you, right? Taking walks, whatever it is. But if you're spent mentally and spiritually, and then you start throwing in big workouts into the mix, your body is going to revolt. And there are things such as adrenal fatigue and other things that can happen. And I wish that on no one, because I myself had adrenal fatigue and I was entering stage 4. And it took me about 8 years in order to get out of it. And even now, I still would say I'm still almost in phase 1. I have to be so careful with what I do and how I expend my energy, because I do expend a lot of energy in all areas, right? So, if something has to go, maybe tone down that giant workout to a nice walk with a friend or a happy little stroll. If it's, a day or two, you need to do that. Especially if you're craving foods. This one, I thought I've made this public before, but who knows at this point what I've said. So if you start craving specific foods, assuming you're not pregnant, even if you are pregnant, look up what those foods are high in, and it will tell you what your body is craving. So I've been very vocal before that, I am iron deficient and at times magnesium deficient. So years upon years upon years ago, I would absolutely crave peanut butter. I'm talking like I could almost eat a whole jar in a day. And I like apples and, I like lots of fruits and vegetables and stuff. I would eat peanut butter on everything. It was odd. I'd probably eat it on broccoli. That's how ridiculous it got. I think I actually did eat it on broccoli once. So, you know that now. So obviously, I'm going through way too much peanut butter, and I decide to look it up. And it turns out that peanut butter is high in magnesium. Well, that makes sense, right? Because, now that I know medically, but at the time I was like, okay, magnesium, that explains a couple little things that I'm having in my body. Started taking a magnesium supplement. The peanut butter cravings went to none. Now that I'm up on my magnesium supplements, I crave peanut butter every so often, and that's usually when I know I need to take a little bit extra, but it's not the consistent that it once was. When I was low in iron, I, would start craving weird things, actually, like cereal and bread, which is very odd for me because I don't eat cereal too often. But I would almost salivate thinking about eating certain cereals and bread. I am not a bread eater. I like it. I don't hate it, but I'm not the kind of person that normally I rip the crust, the bread off. If I'm eating a hamburger, I rip all the breading off, which I know is very odd, but I'm just not a bread person. And then I'm craving breads. And I'm thinking, okay, this is weird. But whatever, your body changes over time. So I go outside one morning and I see this clay pot. And seriously, in my mind, I thought, what if I were to just take a piece of that and eat it? And I was like, what? So then I found out there's a thing called pica. And pica is what happens when you're extremely low in iron. You actually start craving things like dirt and clay pots. Believe it or not, it's a thing. And ice. I am not normally an ice drinker. I like everything room temperature. I'm a very placid, middle of the road kind of gal. But all of a sudden I would start craving ice. I would want to chew on it. And that's part of pica as well. So knowing those little things, I had a friend who was pregnant and she was tripling down on this one thing that she was craving. And we went and we looked it up and we found out, okay, this is what your body needs. got her a supplement with that in it, and all the cravings went away. And she went back to normal and being able to eat a very normal diet. But it really is important for you to research if you're craving odd foods. And I mean, more than just like, oh, pizza sounds good. Okay, yes, of course, pizza normally sounds good to everyone. But it's when you're craving pizza every single day, there's something in that your body wants, whether it's the yeast or it's the cheese or whether it's the salt. A lot of things with salt lately, especially with electrolytes. If you're in the northern hemisphere, it's summertime right now, you're probably sweating a lot more than normal. Make sure that you're keeping your electrolytes up to date. I get the sugar-free Gatorade. I also found an electrolyte powder that has amino acids in it. It really, really, really helps. I am not having these weird nausea episodes that I was getting. And obviously, you guys know that when I do a lot of energy work, I run very warm, and so I'm sweating like crazy, and therefore I'm losing a lot of electrolytes. So instead of bombarding my body with a whole bunch of salt or potassium, because that's not good, electrolyte powders or electrolyte drinks really help even everything out. One thing that I am huge on, and I feel like this is a given if you're drawn and listening to me, but this is what I'm going to go a little more into the advanced part. Spiritual accountability is key. Okay? Without spiritual accountability, you're giving all your power away and you're not learning anything, because you're putting all the power into, oh, God did this to me, or the devil did it, or I've heard some people, oh, a witch did this to me. Okay, first of all, to be perfectly honest with you, the amount of work it takes to do dark magic, like hexes and bad spell work, is a lot. The average witch is not doing that because you cut them off in traffic, okay? Like, calm down. And if someone did do bad magic on you, take some spiritual accountability for your actions and say you're sorry for whatever it was that you did. Because if someone is taking the time and the energy to do something bad to you, there usually is a reason, right? I mean, very, very rarely is someone taking the time and energy that it takes to do something awful for something really, really small and flippant. Most witches don't care. We just say, you know what, karma's going to get you. Not even worried about it. Obviously, I'm a white witch. I don't do any dark magic whatsoever. I will just let karma play out. And sometimes I'm lucky enough to see it and witness it. Other times I'm not. But spiritual accountability really is key, okay? There are some people who get into spirituality and they don't want to take any personal accountability for anything. Or anything. Everything that they do, that was part of my growing journey. Okay, but you also knew you were being a you-know-what. So, you can say you're sorry for that. And there's nothing wrong. I've said I'm sorry to people for things that I've done, and I've actively told them, hey, I know I was rude or I was mean or whatever it was that I did. And it was because I didn't know any better. And I'm really, really sorry for how I acted. I didn't know any better at the time, but I know better now. And I deeply apologize, if I hurt you in any way. And to be honest, most people are really, really forgiving. Most people. I said most, not all. But owning up and being accountable for your actions, whether they were before you knew, even worse if you do know. Because if you know better and you do it anyway, you're going to pay a higher price. Because trust me, Carmen keeps score. She knows. Now, the other part about spiritual accountability, and the reason why I'm so emphatic on it, is because if you're going to tell others your experiences or something that happened to you or part of your journey, etc., you have to tell the truth. And the truth involves you taking accountability where it is necessary. And the reason I bring that up is because, there are people out in the world who are telling stories and they're inciting fear in other people. And people are freaking out, thinking, oh my God, I don't want that to happen to me. So I'm not going to learn anything else about XYZ subject because this happened to this person, but that person isn't telling you the whole story. And this is where our discernment comes into play. If you hear someone tell a story and it's completely outlandish and you're thinking, whoa, okay, I'll just give the witch example because I heard that on a podcast once. This person called in, they were like, I cut this lady off in traffic and she gave me like the devil horn sign and then flipped me off. And then afterwards, everything in my life went downhill and I know she was a witch and she cursed me. And, I'm listening to this and I'm cackling because I think it's hilarious. No, she probably just did that to be like, go away. And, bad juju or bad energy. But this person bought into it and started telling everyone who would listen that they were hexed by a witch because they cut her off in traffic. Not joking. I'm not making fun of this person because whatever, it was real to them. But the reality of it is A, that person is quite uneducated about how most witches work. And B, they're not taking any personal accountability for what they did. Okay, if you cut this person off in traffic, what did you do to elicit such a response? Because for the most part, yeah, we get cut off in traffic, but like, honestly, you have to catch someone on like a really bad day for them to take the time to flip you off. Most of the time, it's like grumble, grumble, grumble in your own car and let it ride. I mean, yes, there are very hostile people who live in the world who will drive up next to you and, make a big old deal about it. But that's when you put your hand up and you say, I'm so sorry, I didn't see you or whatever. And usually like it's done, it's over with. But if you're going to go around and you're going to tell everyone a witch hexed me, I'm absolutely sure if that really did happen, there was way more to that story than just you cut them off in traffic. It had to be a little bit more than something like that. And even if you did cut them off in traffic, if you did it purposely to be rude, that's on you. Own up to that. But you also are accountable for everything that you go and tell other people. And that's why before I put content out, I sit here, I write notes, I think about it, I pray on it. I have had things that I have wanted to talk about that I have been absolutely stopped from recording. And that is because Spirit has told me like, nope, either the world's not ready for that or you need to go through more in order to see more clarity on that situation. And I get that. And hey, we are always learning, we're always evolving, we're always growing. And I'm 100% on that. So when I speak about things, I try to make sure that they are things that I have lived long enough and through over and over and over, myself, other people that I've witnessed, that I can say, okay, concretely, I can share this information and say, without a doubt, these are best practices. On that note, if you are going to represent yourself as something, you are now responsible as being a spokesperson for every single person in that community. And for some of you, this is going to go right over your head. Others of you, you're going to get it immediately. So I'm going to walk you through it a little bit. If you are going to represent yourself as a magi, a witch, spiritual person, whatever it is that you're telling the world you are, okay? There are going to be people in your life that you're going to meet, that you're going to represent yourself as such. And you are going to be the only person in that person's lifetime that they are ever going to meet from that community. And it is a very large responsibility to bear, to know that you have to be the best representation of whatever it is that you are claiming to be. And this is why I try to forewarn people before going out in public and making content and naming themselves whatever, that they really know what they're talking about and they really fully understand it and that they've grasped it. And I'm not a gatekeeper, okay? I'm really not into that at all. But what I am saying is, understand if you're going to name yourself as something, that there's a lot of other people in your community who have put in a lot more years and a lot of research, and they have earned that name and that title. And so if you come along and you watched a documentary, now you're going to call yourself a spiritual guru, and all you've watched is one documentary and you know absolutely nothing, you've done no shadow work, no healing work, you've never done any type of work whatsoever on energy, and you're going to go out telling people that you know what's up, you now represent an entire community. And as quickly as people might listen to you, you also can very, very quickly turn off a whole bunch of people and play right into their negative stereotypes of different types of people. So it's a heavy, heavy responsibility. I am a white witch. I have been that for a lot of years, okay? Many, many decades. I have done a lot of work. I know what I am talking about. I do not say that term and wear that label lightly, nor when I say I'm a metaphysical teacher or that I'm spiritual and with some of the gifts that I have. And I actually play down some of the gifts that I have purposely, because some of them might be a little newer, or some of them, the world doesn't quite understand yet, and we don't have names for things. And, I've had people ask me before, well, what should I call you? Because I am so many different things. And the answer that I give over and over is, the word that people used to call me is no longer valid. So there isn't really a name for what I am anymore. Because if you call me a shaman, someone's going to speak up and say, that's cultural appropriation, not even knowing my ethnic background whatsoever. If I go forward and I say I'm a minister, a non-denominational minister, which I am, there are other people who are going to say, well, you weren't ordained by a church, so therefore I don't recognize you, even though I was ordained in a church. So, it goes on and on and on from there. And my cousin, I'm going to bring this up. This is a little bit of a touchy subject, but I think it warrants being said. My cousin, who I had record with me one time, and I love him dearly. I remember we were in a very awkward situation where, he is gay, and someone called him a very ugly name to see what his reaction would be. And so he replied with, it's a bundle of sticks, which technically that's what that term means, that word that we don't say. And he was very calm about it. Well, I, of course, being protective and loving him, lost it, because I knew what this person was trying to do. They wanted to elicit a response from him. And so after I calmed down, he and I talked about it. And I said, how are you, first of all, awesome that you were able to just be so nonchalant about it, but I know that has to hurt you somewhere deep inside. And he said, well, of course. But he said, for some people, I am the only gay man that they will ever meet or ever have met. So at that moment, I now represent every gay man alive. Because to that other person, I am the only gay man that they've ever met and possibly ever will meet. So if I can show them that we're people, we exist, we deserve to be here, we are wonderful people as well, and we don't play into all your stereotypes, maybe I can change that person's mind. And maybe I can bring their hate and their stereotypes down. And that stuck with me. And God, we were young when this happened. But, for him even to have that amount of self-awareness, and I know I'm getting choked up. I end up crying on like almost every episode. This is awesome. But because I love you, and for you to have that awareness at that young of an age and that presence within you to even understand how heavy that is. It is heavy, y'all. Okay? To know that if you're naming yourself something, you are now that representation for everyone within your community. So name yourself wisely and be the best that you can be. All right, a little composure now. Next is thoughts are things. Be very, very careful how you speak to others, how you speak to yourself, and what you speak into existence. I make jokes about myself. We all self-deprecate at times. Sometimes it's usually, a self-preservation measure, because if I make fun of it first, then you don't get one up on me. But be very conscientious what it is that you are saying about yourself. And if you make a joke, make it more loving, especially if it's something that you're trying to work on. Thoughts are things, and they can manifest. And I understand that when we're angry, we have a tendency to say things that we normally wouldn't mean when we're in a place of love, right? But really, really, really be careful what you say when you're mad or in an angry, upset state. Because that's putting that energy back out into the world. And whether you're generalizing or you're saying it to one specific person. So, true story, there was a study done years upon years ago that was studying the fact that men tend to pass away before women, mortality rates. And there was a city in which this was happening a lot. And so someone came in to kind of study what was going on. Is it their diet? Is it this? Is it that? And they noticed when they brought in all the wives and all the husbands and they separated them, all the wives were constantly, I don't know about a word, sorry, bitching about their men. And this is years ago, by the way. I think this is like in the 50s. And so they noticed that the men, for the most part, were just kind of like quiet or kind of relieved that the women were in the other room. So they started watching their interactions at home and realizing basically the wives were just nagging or harping on the men constantly. And for whatever reason, they were noticing that when these women were doing it, they were getting really close to the men's face, right? And that they would go to bed angry, the whole thing. And that when they were sleeping, the wives were usually sleeping with their mouths going towards the men. So their breath was going in that direction. And I don't know what scientists decided to, but somebody started actually measuring the breath and the chemicals that were in it. And what they found out was when someone is in a very upset state of anger and frustration, we actually have chemicals that come out of our breath, and they are poison. They are toxic. I'm not making this up. This is actual science. It's probably buried deep by now, but it actually is science. Same thing with tears. Now, tears are a form of release, right? But did you know that when we cry, whether it's hormonal crying or I'm sad and I'm crying, tears actually have toxins. So it is healthy to cry. Now, is it healthy to cry 24/7 all the time? Absolutely not. But a little, that old adage, like a good cry will do you good. It's something like that. That is true because tears actually hold toxins. And so by releasing those toxins out of the tear ducts, apparently those toxins don't come out of the body in other ways. So it is important. If you need to cry, cry. If you want to do it alone, do it alone. True story, I didn't cry for like 13 years. And we used to have a joke that I didn't have tear ducts. And then one day I decided to open up my heart. And I did. And it took about a week to do. And now I cry at the drop of a hat. So even though I know that, I do have some friends that will sometimes make jokes and tease me about it, and I totally laugh at it and we make jokes, it's actually a huge thing for me to be able to cry. Not even in private, but like on these recordings and be vulnerable. It's huge from the old me before I did that work. And yes, there was an adequate reason as to why I didn't cry, and completely understand why, and it was deliberate. But when I actually broke that, oh, the release. And now I'm proud when I do. So sometimes out there you're going to find people and they have like these weird traits that they do, and you can kind of look at them and be like, okay, are they gloating or are they vain? This one person who I absolutely love always takes pictures, always does lots of selfies with themselves and other people, not just of themselves. And it's almost to the point where it's almost excessive. And so, kind of early on in getting to know them, I sat down and I asked. And they ended up sharing that they'd had a lot of people die in their life. And that really the only thing that they had left of the people who passed on were pictures. So that's why they're always snapping pictures, because it's really, really important to them to have those memories that they can look back on and remember how happy they were at that time with whoever it was. And then we went a little deeper, and it turned out that for years, this person hated how they looked, and they worked really, really, really hard in order to change their looks, and did everything they could do under the sun, and it was quite a process. And they're so happy and so free with who they are today as a result that they want to document that. And it's funny because people who knew what they were before, what they looked like before, and what they look like now, there are some people who take joy and revel in the fact that they're so proud to document who they are. And there are other people who still have the audacity to hate on them and be jealous. And, you're not going to change everyone's mind, but understanding someone and having that love and that compassion and then cheering them on when you understand why they do whatever they do. And even if you have to explain it to a couple other people, like, hey, don't give them crap for whatever it is that they're doing. They have their reasons. We all have our reasons for doing stuff. There's stuff that's acceptable and stuff that we need to grow out of, right? Simple. All right, I am going to change pace a little bit, and I'm going to talk about spell work and deities. And again, this might not have anything to do with you and your practice, so you can go ahead and turn it off now, or you could save this for later, whatever works. When it comes to spell work, number one, be very cognizant what you are working with, okay? Whether it's the intention, whether it is the physical matter that you're working with, you need to go as far as being in the proper mood and being in the proper energetic space to do your work, okay? Especially if you're a beginner, 100,000%. For those of you who have been doing spell work for a good long time, I'm not saying anything new to any of you. You already know this. But it is extremely important that you understand what it is that you're doing, that you're in the proper mood, you're in the proper energetic space and proper physical space to do your work. Because if you're trying to do a spell to manifest something and you're in a really cruddy mood, it's not going to work. They cancel each other out. The other thing is, things can go really sideways. If you are, let's say, in a manic mood and you're trying to manifest like peace and calmness, that is not when you are doing spell work to manifest peace and calm when you're in mania. Is there energy work that you can do at that moment to kind of, bring yourself down? Yeah, absolutely. Go ground. There's lots of different things you can do. But when it comes to spell work specifically, being cognizant, like what plants you're using, what crystals you're using, what is in your immediate surroundings. Have you cleared your space? Have you created a circle? All of these things need to be in place for proper spell work. You don't just do it, okay, willy-nilly. Because willy-nilly spell work, trust me, the results end up being willy-nilly. Now, one other thing is it's extremely important to know what planets are retrograde and when the moon is void of course. And this is extremely important if you are into spell work. I would hope that you would know this, but if you don't and you're just starting to dabble, please understand, go to Google, ask when the moon is void of course, and make sure that you are doing your spell work when it is not void of course. For those of you who don't know what that means, when the moon is void of course, any magic that is done becomes chaos magic. Meaning the universe is going to do whatever it wants in the most chaotic way possible. And it is extremely important that you not do that, especially if you are a beginner. If you are a beginner, okay, I don't even have content for that. So I would advise you to read up and definitely make sure you know what you're doing before you're starting or initiating any spell work. But these little things, like I said, once you've been doing this a lot longer, true story, I was doing some release work and manifestation work. And the moon was going to be void of course that day, and I knew the time period, and it was going to be void of course for about 18 minutes. And so in order to do the work that we were going to do, there was 3 of us. We needed to be outside and we needed a fire. And so we had planned we were going to do it after the moon was void of course. And all of a sudden, one person races outside and says, "We got to start the fire now. It's about to start raining." And I said, "No, do not start the fire now. The moon is void of course. Absolutely not. To wait, 20 more minutes until it's back to normal again." And this person absolutely does not listen, whips the other person into a frenzy. And for whatever reason, I decided to go along with the group because I was kind of leading it. And we go out and we do this. And the person who lit the fire is pretty chaotic. I would say they're a chaos magic practitioner. That's a good way to... I say that with love, but it's not exactly a compliment either. So this person basically just starts everything. And I mean, I'm sitting there, my eyes are bugging out. The other person is just going with it because they just kind of went along with everything. And they both start, and I am doing my best to make sure I am waiting this out as absolute long as I can until the moon goes normal again. And unfortunately, it starts raining. And so the fire's about to go out because we're not under a covering. And so I have to do my work. So I do it, I put as little energy into it as possible because I'm already knowing chaos magic is not my jam. I am a planner. I do not like chaos magic. It does not work for me normally. Work for me as in I don't enjoy it. It's there's too many variables. It's too freaky for me. And of course, what ends up happening the next day or two, everything and anything insane that could happen in regards to the clearing and manifestations for all three of us ends up happening. And I mean, we're talking the police were involved in one case, and it was not at all normal. I mean, it went off the rails. So, again, being cognizant where the moon is. If the moon is void of course, my recommendation is do not go unless you're into chaos magic. If you're into chaos magic and you already have practiced it and you understand it and that's the way you want to live your life, I have absolute respect for you. Do you, boo? I don't mind. But for the average person who doesn't want life going off the rails, I would highly recommend that you look that one up. Also, making sure what's in retrograde, because planets being in retrograde can affect your spell work, especially if it's a planet like Mars or Venus, depending on what it is that you're trying to manifest. Mercury as well. If Mercury, which handles communications, handle technology, if Mercury's in retrograde, it's, not the most fun time for me. I'm double ruled by Mercury, so it gets a very chaotic and crazy time. So, making sure that everything is proper and where it should be. And if that means you have to put your spell work off, that's what it means. Being in the proper mood and is extremely important as well. Because again, if you're trying to manifest something happy and you're in a cruddy mood, it cancels each other out. The energetic space is extremely important, and I don't just mean within your circle. I mean, I'm just going to use this as an example. If you're in the middle of a drug house and you're trying to manifest like peace, love, and prosperity, you are not in the proper space. That would be akin to doing it when all the planets are retrograde and the moon's void of course. You're just doing chaos magic. You have too much energetic nonsense happening around you. You have people who are open spiritually, and I don't mean in a good way. I mean their webs are torn, especially when there's drugs involved. You've got negative entities roaming around, all sorts of bad things. Do not do it. I personally do not do any spell work if I have imbibed any alcohol. I actually, before most of my spell work, will not eat meat within a day or two before. I really try to clear out my being as much as possible. Sometimes I'll do a fast. There are times I won't even have caffeine in my system. I am a little extreme, but again, it's because my energy is pretty strong and extreme. Does everyone need to go to all these lengths? No, but the type of magic that I perform, and usually because it involves usually helping other people, or even myself, which goes out and helps other people, I am extremely picky about what I do. For the most part, I will not even do spell work if there is anyone else in my house, unless we were doing it together. So, like I said, I'm hyper picky, but being extremely cognizant of what you are doing and the effect. And if, you live in a space where there are other people, whether it's transitory, like people are in and out all the time, as long as you have your own space, that you are going to be left alone, no one is going to come in, no one is breaking your circle. I would also recommend energy bubbling that specific location, like if it's a room or an office, energetically protect the entire room so that whatever it is you are doing spell work wise doesn't bleed out into the rest of the house and affect other people. Because again, you don't want to affect other people and take away their free will. All right, getting towards the end. Deities. I do not work directly with deities. I have on very, very, very simple occasions, not directly. I have worked more with the characteristics of a specific deity. I know people who do deity work. I have no issue with it. But here is what I'm going to say about that. You really, really, really need to know what or who you are trying to work with and what it is that they want to work with you. Everything has a price. All magic comes with a price, good or bad. Okay? So it's extremely important. There's an old phrase, and I'm sorry it's a little crude, but don't write a check your ass can't cash. Okay? And it really, really is true when it comes to deity work. Now, working with the characteristics of a certain deity, I understand that, okay? But if you're trying to do direct deity worship and or work with a specific deity for a specific goal, you need to really do your homework about who and what that deity is and what they expect in recompense. Because unfortunately, we have a lot of people who know a lot of things, but they don't know much. And so they go out willy-nilly asking for help from different deities, and they don't want to pay up. They got what they wanted. It's a selfish world, right? And there are a lot of people who are into instant gratification. So the minute they get what they want, all of a sudden they don't want to pay the toll. Well, unfortunately, someone has to pay the piper. And if that deity is not paid whatever its toll is, there will be issues. And you will be forced to pay, and or you're going to have to renegotiate your contract. Now, the reason why I'm going into this, and I'm going to actually tell a story. So, years upon years upon years ago, I was going through a time in my life that things were not changing, but I knew they needed to change because I wasn't necessarily happy with how things were, but I needed change, and I knew I needed to break out of a cycle, right, of what I was in. And so it was near a specific pagan holiday, and I somehow knew, which this happens to me often, this is why I'm an eclectic witch, and I'm solitary, which means I work alone, I don't work with a coven. And no shame to anyone who works with a coven or who follows a specific path. I love you all, and I completely understand that. And there is absolutely a time and a place for that. And I have worked within a small coven before. It's just not something I care to do on a regular basis. So that being said, we come close to this holiday, and I'm not going to say specifically who it was, but I decided I was going to ask a specific deity for help. And I somehow knew this very, very, very ancient ritual of something that you make and you proffer to the deity for help. And I did the whole thing and sat back and waited. And a month later, my life was so completely razed to the ground and upside down that you probably would not have recognized me from the month before. It started about 2 days after I had done this. It was extremely quick. And when I say things were set in motion, it was almost every single day there was a major overhaul. I'm talking my entire life was completely different. And it was a lot. You probably can understand now why I don't like chaos magic, because that was just way too much for me. So, about a month later, the dust is starting to settle finally. Everything that could have changed had already changed. So at that point, and I'm taking a walk with a dear friend of mine, And they're like, what started all this? Like, this kind of came out of nowhere. Like, everything was kind of chill and just how it was. And then all of a sudden, everything like flipped upside down and then shook itself out and then rearranged itself. And like, whoa. And so I told them about what I had done. And they asked what deity, and I told them. And they stopped and they started laughing hysterically. And I was like, what? And they were like, well, didn't you know? Like, that's what that deity does. They literally burn everything you know to the ground, and then they rebuild you back up. Like, that's what they're known for. And I was like, that's not at all what I had, had thought. Like, the holiday they're associated with is like love and beauty and all this nice, happy, good stuff. They're like, oh, no, 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 no. Like, this is why in the old pagan days, like, on that day, this is why they did huge bonfires to this specific deity, because that's kind of their thing. And so, and yes, I'm older. Okay. So didn't really have the internet that we have now. And I should have done my research. I was younger. I was young enough that I'll give myself a pass because I didn't know any better, but I was old enough that I should have known better. We'll put it that way. And so, looking back on that time, everything shifted for the best. And it really was what I needed, right? Like, I needed something to majorly shake up my life. Otherwise, it was just going to keep on keeping on, and it was going to stay in this very kind of toxic, stagnant circle because it had been like that for so long. So I really needed something to get in there and to just shake everything to the core in order for me to rebuild. But it was very, very jarring. So, looking back on it now, I would have liked a much more easier, softer approach to that, but it is what it is. And that was who came forward at that time. And that really draws me to my last point, which is if you're drawn to something, whether it be a deity, whether it be a specific type of spirituality path, whether it's, rocks, gems, plants, whatever it is, there's so much stuff nowadays. Even songs, right? Like, even specific songs. Really, really delve in and analyze why. Are you supposed to be working with that? Are you supposed to use it for healing? Is it advising you need to heal something? I had a friend who at one point just kept finding tiger's eye everywhere. And it got to be a joke. Like, we don't necessarily live in an area where you just randomly find gemstones everywhere, but everywhere they would go, they would end up finding tiger's eye. So I said, okay, after like the 8th time of this, you're starting to form a collection. Let's start looking up what tiger's eye is and like what the universe is screaming at you to start working on. So things like that. Sometimes it's prepping you for work to come. So, I've had times when deities have shown up and I'm absolutely, flummoxed. Why are you here? Why are I'm also humbled, but at the same time, like, who are you? Why are you here? And like, what's going on? And, they don't have a lot of answers for me. I've shared my, when the Norse god Tyr came and visited me, and I was extremely confused, like, very humbled, but I also really don't understand why you're here. And then understanding the work that I was going into, he was kind of there as an alert to let me know what was to come, not only physically within my life, but also the work that I was about to venture into, and to help get me prepared for that. So if all of a sudden you're like super drawn to a specific deity or a specific path, research it, look into it. Ask yourself, what does this have to do with me? And if it doesn't make any sense, like, I've done all the healing work on that, or none of this hits on me in particular, maybe it's helping you get prepared for someone who's going to come into your life that you're going to be helping. Maybe it's going to help you with what's coming next in your life that you're going to be working on. When it comes to songs, I'm really big into lyrics. So lyrics speak to me more than the music itself. I love music, don't get me wrong, but the lyrics, like, that's liquid poetry for me, is song lyrics. So at this one time, I was in a relationship. I was quite happy. Everything was good. And this song came out, and the name of the song was Let It Go. And by James Bay, right? So you can tell how long ago this was. This song came out, and I mean, every time I got in the car, the song came on the radio. And I dug that song. Like, that was my jam. And to the point that I would get in the car, and these are the times of radio only, right? The song would start as soon as I started driving. When it ended, I would flip radio stations, and it would be on the next radio station. And then the next. I would end up listening to the song on repeat the entire way to and from work, which was like an hour each way. And I mean, the lyrics had made no sense to me at the time. Like, why was I so into this song? This song is soulful. It's about letting a relationship go that doesn't work for you anymore. And I was in a very, what I thought was a happy relationship at the time. So, I mean, this went on for about a month. Like, I was stuck on this song, y'all. Okay? Like, it was my jam, I'm telling you. And one day, I remember thinking, this is kind of odd, Like, why am I resonating with this? But like, oh, well. And it was a couple days later, I ended up coming home, and the person I was with at the time came home in this very weird mood. And it was the fastest breakup I've ever had, and the easiest breakup I've ever had. It was all over within 45 minutes, and I didn't cry. I wasn't upset. I was, in a way, almost relieved and confused at the same time, because I was like, we were just fine. Like, it happened on a dime. And, things like that have been in my life always. Like, when the universe wants something to change or someone needs to be plucked from my life, they're just gone. And it's not, me having such hardcore boundaries, because sometimes I'm the queen of excuses for other people. Don't get me wrong. I have a really big heart, just like the most of you. And I will give people umpteen million chances and, try and rationalize their behavior and see if they could do better and all the things. But it was so funny in this situation where this song, I had just been singing it nonstop for like a month. And it was almost like, in that singing of the song, I was preparing for this very abrupt end to this pretty long relationship that I thought everything was fine. And it was just so sudden. And it was interesting because after that happened, I listened to the song a couple more times, and the lyrics hit me. Like, whoa. That was preparing me for what was going to happen. And I'm not saying this has happened in every song that you like or that you're into. The lyrics are going to be giving you some hidden message. Sometimes you just like a song because you just like a song, right? But when something's almost like neurotic like that, and you can't understand why, there's usually a message in there, or it's getting you prepared for something. So keep your eyes peeled. We live in a wondrous world. These are extremely wild times. I hope all of this helps you in some way, shape, or form. I gave you guys a lot of information in this, and I really, really appreciate you for bearing with me for an hour and a half while I told you all these stories and tried to really drive home a lot of these points. But I really felt that it was pertinent, and I really, really, really want to give my appreciation to the two people, you guys know who you are, who brought this to my attention to please do an audio like this. It was something that I had kind of toyed with the idea, but I thought, who am I to speak on this? And both of you stepped up within 2 days of each other and asked me for it. Any of you out there who have any content ideas for me, things you want me to talk about, please share it. If Spirit gives me the green light, I will absolutely do it. For those of you, if you're okay with me using your name or you want me to, I'm a-okay with that. If I don't have your express permission, I never do. But just know that I love and I appreciate all of you out there. I appreciate all the work that you guys are doing and all the light that you guys are shining, not only for yourselves, but for everyone within your lives and out exponentially to the world.